I'm now at the point where I want to be looking at the final touches which I'm doing to the images. I've got this image up in front of me, which we did the original raw conversion first of all, and I brought it up to the same level as the other one. So I've done all the cleaning work, I've done all the dodging and burning, the color correction and everything else as well. And just so you can see where it started at, it started there, and I got it to this point here, which I'm happy with. Now it's nearly ready to be as a final image, but I want to go through a checklist to make sure I've done things correctly. Now, I've deliberately left some things out in this. I've deliberately left some things which I haven't done on this file to fix at this stage. Now, if you have got a checklist like the one which we provided you with, it's good to be looking at this constantly through the whole file to make sure that you are doing everything. But say if you're a bit newer to retouching, then there's no harm in doing it at the end, but know that you should really be checking things as you're going along. But let me show you how I'll do it if I'm checking things at the end and correcting things. So if you get the checklist in front of you, and let's have a look down it. So the first one is all the skin texture consistent for the areas? So what I mean by that is the forehead texture correct in that area and around it, and the same with any other area as well. And if I need to do any fixes, I've got this healing layer, which is from the workflow action which has been set out. Now I've deliberately left some things out which I would fix. So, there's a spot here, so I'm going to need to fix this. Now, bearing in mind, this has had some liquefying done to it already, so any work which I'm doing now is technically classed as destructive because I cannot go back below those layers, which is why it's really, really important to do it as you're going along. But let's just say that I took this photograph, I'm happy with the colour, how it's going to be, it's for my portfolio, but I just want to tweak a couple of things which I may have missed. So I'm going to grab my healing brush tool and I'm just going to come in and I'm going to fix these issues here. Just going around them and just getting them. A few down here as well, and just neatening up these bits. Okay, so the next one is make sure that the lips have a pleasing texture. So let's go down to the lips. Oh, I can see a couple of issues here. So if I look a bit further zoomed out, obviously it's got lip gloss on them, so they're supposed to be shiny in places. But I think there's a couple of areas which we can definitely improve on. So I'm going to take away some of these bits here. And I can see a lump here on this lip line, which I definitely don't want there. I'm going to come in and just get my clone stamp tool and just get rid of that. And let's see what else there is. I'm going to maybe reduce this line here to make it a bit more pleasing and rounded. Now these colour areas are created from the lip gloss, so I'm not too worried about those. I'm just going to here, and let's get rid of a couple of these hairs down here as well. So I'm doing everything on top of it, as you can see, as a final step. Let's get rid of that bit, that bit, that bit. Just using the clone stamp, just brushing over it with the custom brush settings. Just getting everything which I want to change. And but I'm going to move on to the next one now. I mean, it's not finished. I wouldn't call this finished. It still needs some more work, which I will be doing. And if I hadn't actually liquefied on this image, then I could actually do this back in the cleaning layers. So it would be a non-destructive workflow. But because I have done some liquefy on this layer in one of the folders, then I can't necessarily do that for this. Okay, let's back out and have a look at the next one. Are all the hair areas taken care of? Okay, so, we've got some crosshairs here. We've got some hairs going over the net, so I want to get rid of those. So just once again, just using the clone stamp tool, same techniques as when we did the hair section. And I think I saw a hair up here as well. So I'm going to use the healing brush for this one and see how this works. I think it'll work just fine. And yes, it has. Okay, and we see some areas here as well. Yep. Let's get rid of these, just using the clone stamp tool. Oh, went a bit too far outside then. Sample again. And let's get rid of these hairs on the ear as well. What I'm doing these final stages to get ready for the final output and to do some sharpening after this. So I want to make sure everything is as good as possible before the sharpening stage, because some things might be accentuated by the sharpening. Plus, once you do sharpen, then it is a little bit more difficult to come back, because you've already either like made a stamp of everything or done some selective sharpening, and some of the mistakes or things which you missed along the way before this stage may be picked up in that stamp layer or something like that, which depending on which way you sharpen. So next we need to check that all the eyelashes are fine. Now these are not fine. This is something which was completely missed in the stage. So this is going to then have to be taken into doing more eyelashes. You're going to have to draw these ones on, and this really should not be missed by this stage. It should be checked. I mean, as we've got it set out in a workflow way, you should not miss this stage. So this, if I was to get to this point and go here now, then I mean, yeah, I could start redrawing them in now and it would look fine, but I would much prefer if I was being able to go back down into the layers and do this. This is a big oversight that I would have missed something up until this stage. But what we're going to do is we're going to draw some more ones in now. So I'm just going to create a new layer. I'm going to get a brush. I'm going to take my transfer, build up and smoothing off. I'm going to put my shape dynamics on, make sure this is set to fade, and we're going to draw some in. So let's set my brush up. Start with about 40% opacity. And let's sample a dark color. And I'll be drawing stuff in. Just like this. But say that's fine, we're done with that. And then I would move on to the next one, which would be have all the veins in the eyes being reduced. I mean, that doesn't really apply to us because we haven't got the eyes open in this one. But once again, it's just a checklist to make sure that everything has been done. Are all the garments clean and free of obstructive wrinkles? Now, we haven't got any garments on this particular one. We've got this face net. Now, it does have this sagging bit, which has come out here. And there was one which was underneath, which has been removed. But this would actually be quite hard to come in and fix in Photoshop. You see, because it doesn't naturally fold round and join up with that bit behind these kind of strands here. So I had a chat with Melissa and she said she was actually fine with this how it is. So we're okay on this occasion for this bit as the bottom bit which has been removed, which I'm sure you'll see in the files anyway. Has the background had all dust marks removed? Now, removing the dust marks in a background is pretty simple, especially if you use the solar curve, which I've provided you with. So if I'm going to check this on, and it's going to make the image look really crazy. So it's pushed and pulled the colors in such a way that it's now accentuated any of the dust spots which are on the image, which you can see in these, well, just in the background, it's pretty blatantly obvious there. So the way to get rid of these is just by healing or cloning. It's no different than working on any other aspect of the image. So just come in and just heal them away until they're gone. You may not even notice some of these when you're actually working and may not think to check for it, but pretty much all images do have some kind of dust markings in the background. Even if the sensor has just been cleaned, it's inevitable when lenses are being changed on a shoot that little specks of dust. It may not be as much as this, it may be a lot less, but it is always good to check and to make sure they're gone. So it would just be a case of coming around and just healing all these away. It can be a little bit time consuming doing this as well, and just changing between the clone stamp tool and the helium brush to work in combination to get the best result. The great thing about working on backgrounds is especially on this sort of image, if I just disable the solar curve, there's no texture in the background anyway, so we're not having to be too careful about trying to preserve anything like that. So we can just remove these things quite simply and quickly. Just going to come around and just quickly do these. Sometimes it may think when you're working on this, you're actually making it look a little bit worse, because see how the colors are changing, it's looking a bit smoother in parts, but it's not actually looking that bad. So if I turn this solar curve off, you can't actually see that transition, which I was just working on there. It's just the way the solar curve has pushed the file in a completely abnormal way. It's just accentuating things like that. So another good thing about the solar curve, it does really accentuate things which you may have missed. For example, like a few little bit of hairs against the background. So in the solar curve off, although you can slightly see that there is a hair dangling down there, it is actually quite difficult to see with that color background. But if I have the solar curve on, I can really easily see that, and I can just quickly come in and just get rid of that. And there's some weird kind of markings on the background here from the neck, although there wasn't any hair removed from there. So not sure what that could have been caused from, but I can just come in and just remove that with the clone stamp tool. And it is just going around the whole image and just getting every single bit. But I'm going to leave that there for now. It's not, I haven't got rid of all the dust spots, but you get the general idea of what you actually have to do to be able to get rid of those things. And you can just disable the solar curve once done. And if I just toggle that layer on and off, especially if I zoom in here, if I just toggle it on and off, you can see all those dust spots which were there are now removed. But once again, these are sort of things which you should really be catching early on in the stage, especially when you're doing your cleaning of the image in the very beginning. You want to try and get rid of all of this as much as possible. But this is acting as a final checklist to make sure that everything's done. Okay, when dodging and burning, the gradients need to be smoothed over all over the frame. So what I'm doing is I'm checking like the forehead to make sure there isn't good transitions over across the lot. I'm checking on like the cheek. I'm checking on the nose. I'm checking everywhere, checking the ear, make sure there's no like blotchy bits. Coming down into the neck, making sure there's like it's all smooth there and it's all consistent. Yeah, and I'm pretty happy with that. Have all color issues been created from dodging and burning been fixed? Yeah, I mean, I don't really see anything there. There's an actual shadow which has changed the color here, which is not caused from me burning anything extra. It's just a natural. I'm happy with that for myself. Over and under saturated areas being fixed. One of the key areas to look out for over and under saturation is actually in the ears, especially if there's a light behind the model. If the model has a light behind their head, and it can make the ear look quite red, especially in this area and up here where the skin is quite thin. And we don't have it on this one. Obviously this was lit from the front, so that's nothing to worry about there. Corrected any redness in the eye. Once again, we don't actually have the eyes open in this one, so that's not an issue. Does the skin have any patches of colour which still need to be fixed? No, we're fine there. Is the focus of the image in the correct area? So yeah, I mean, it is all about the face on this one, and we can see that the face is a bit brighter. There's big highlights on there, so that's not an issue here. The chest is darker. If the chest was brighter than the actual face, then your eye would naturally be drawn to the brightest area of the image. And there's nothing on the chest here or on the neck. It's not the focal point of the image, so we need to make sure that that is what we're concentrating on, and that looks successful to me. Make sure any areas which need to be liquefied have been done. So I wonder if there's anything we can actually fix here. So there actually is. Now, this is something which if you got the liquefy layer already, then you can go ahead and then you can amend that so you don't have to create another one. But let's say I haven't actually liquefied anything and I wanted to now do the liquefy to correct any bits which need to be done. So we've got this bit, the top of the head, the hair here, and some of these lines are a bit wavy here, which we could certainly push in with a bit of liquefy. So So we're pretty much at the bottom of the beauty checklist. So the only thing which is afterwards is, has sharpening been applied to the correct areas? So I now know if I've gone through the checklist and I've followed the workflow that I've done everything up to this point, and I'm happy to then be able to liquefy and not have to worry too much about going down below it. So I'm now going to create a stamp of everything. And I'm going to go into my liquefy layer. And I'm going to get the forward warp tool. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and see what we can fix here. I'm make the brush a little bit bigger. I'm going to push this in. I'm going to try and make this a bit more rounded. A bit more of a pleasing line to it, so it's not so wavy. And also the same here. What I'm actually going to grab now is I'm going to grab a freeze mask tool. So on the left hand side right here is the freeze mask. And if I paint red here, what that's going to mean to liquefy is anything which is covered in red, it's not going to actually have an effect when I use the forward warp tool. So if I do that and I go back to my forward warp tool, I don't have to be as precise anymore. I can drag and have my cursor in that hairband, and it's not going to have an impact of pulling those pixels because they're in the freeze mask. Just going to round that off a bit more. If I want to have a look what that is, you've got the eraser for the freeze mask, which is just below it. We just get rid of that, and we see you haven't actually altered the actual hairband itself there. And now I'm okay to do that. But just before and after that, you can see the amendments which I've just made there. But once again, this is the liquefying is something which you really want to be doing before the color work, so you don't have to potentially amend the color if you're working for a client. So if you liquefy after the color and then you need to adjust the colors for your client in some way, then you're going to have to redo the liquefy because you've made changes above that and you've made a stamp of the liquefy. It's simple to do in a non-destructive way, is if you just do your stamp layer of everything to liquefy underneath the look layer, then you can just like toggle that on and off. Then you can adjust that afterwards if you want. We come to the final bit, is has sharpening been applied in the correct areas and the right amount? Looking at this image, I mean, it doesn't really need any sharpening added to it. Let's for the sake of it say we did need to sharpen like the eyes and maybe the nose. And how would I go about doing that? So I'm going to use a high pass sharpening method for this. So I'm going to create another stamp layer of everything. And I'm going to change the blending mode to linear light, which is going to make it look pretty crazy, but that's fine. I'm going to filter, other, and high pass. You see what that's done is it's neutralized that color which the blending mode changed it to, and it looks really, really crunchy. If I take this down to 0.1, that's just applying a sharpening radius of 0.1% per pixel. And if I take it all the way up, then it's like 1000, and it's going to look pretty whack. And you can adjust it down to try and find the right sort of area which you might like it. I'm just going to put it on, I'm going to have this on 1 pixel. So I'm going to press OK to that. Then I'm actually going to create a layer mask and make it black. And now I'm going to paint with white on my mask to reveal the areas which I wanted to actually sharpen. So I'm just going to paint it in white here, just a bit on the cheek, a bit over the eyes, and a bit over the nose as well. And if we have a look at that layer mask, you can see I've just applied it in a pretty small amount to do that. If the lips needed sharpening, then we do that as well. A little bit under the chin, which isn't really necessary on this. And on the chin, the other eye, maybe the eyebrow, and maybe you want to sharpen some of the jewels. So I'm being really selective with my sharpening, and only applying it to areas which I think may need sharpening applied to it. You wouldn't sharpen the entire image because then it can have a bit of a negative effect on like highlights. It can make it look a little bit crunchy. So we want to do sharpening selectively. And we want to sharpen after we've done all the work which we're going to do to the image, because then we're not enhancing negative issues because we've already fixed everything. We're just adding sharpness without having to worry about having to do any more fixes. If I just zoom in here, I just toggle the layer before and after, you can see how much I've sharpened that by, which is quite a lot, especially on that cheek area. So I'm going to tone it down a bit. I'm going to grab a black brush and paint on the mask. And you can see how it looks a bit of a strange sort of effect on the cheek here. That's what I mean by that crunchiness. I'm just going to pull back a little bit on there. And then I'm pretty happy with that result. So all we would need to do now is just save all this file, and I'm pretty happy with it. So I'm going to save this, which is saving now. And now my work's saved and I'm happy to output it for a client.